We are off the back of our most successful Sunday to date on a Turf and Touchdowns podcast. Get yourself a drink, sit down. We've got half an hour of selections coming at you with hopefully plenty more winners. Luke Elder alongside Tom Collins. Tom, excited. Christmas is around the corner. Playoff football is around the corner. We're a week before the championship game in fantasy football. Everything's just good in life at the moment.
Yeah, it really is. That championship game, by the way, in fantasy football could be huge for both of us in two different leagues. You're looking likely to get there in one league. I'm looking likely to get there in the Dynasty League against my brother, which will be interesting. Yes, Christmas is right around the corner. We've got 6 days at the time of recording, so very festive time of year. And not only are we going to be celebrating Christmas, but we're celebrating an excellent podcast last Sunday.
Absolutely. We had 7 winners from 9 selections. They were 3 for me and 4 for you. I was 3 from 4. You were 4 from 5. At one point, it looked like it wasn't going to be quite as successful as that, but thankfully things came round our way. We were on the side of the betting gods last week. My selection, Adam Thielen, he went over his yards by literally half a yard. He went over his catches by half a catch, and you had Nick Chubb who went over by I think half a yard as well. So for all that we complain about the betting gods and the football gods, they liked us last week. They shone on us.
They did. I have to say, you have had that a couple of times through the season, though you have had the worst beat of all with Tony Pollard way back in the middle part of the year, where he went over and then actually ended under, which was tough. This was the first time I've covered by half a yard, so I'm very happy for the betting gods. It's about time I had a reprieve. And what made it more interesting was that Nick Chubb broke his foot. So he didn't even come back into the game. He cleared the over by half a yard and then broke his foot on that play and was done. So it was like perfect timing. Obviously, I feel sorry and bad for Nick. He's going through rehab for that foot injury. But for us on the podcast and everyone that hopefully followed in on the selections, we put a tick next to that selection there.
Yeah, this does go along with a trend, though, because we're not going to do a what on earth this week because we're kind of the what on earth, because we've mentioned it the last few weeks. We've got players hurt, and we're not meaning to, but Nick Chubb last week, broken foot, out for the year. David Montgomery, my wonderful, sweet David Montgomery, done for the year now, which Jahmyr Gibbs managers are going to be delighted with, but he's having season-ending surgery. Taysom Hill, 2-3 weeks ago, out for the season. I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, Brian Robinson for you, he got hurt in the game, was out. He came back next week, and that was absolutely fine, but we need to stop this.
We do.
And we need to keep on making our guys healthy.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there's nothing worse than a player prop that loses due to injury rather than poor decision making from on our behalf. So, yeah, if they stay healthy and the bet loses, then we were just wrong. If they get injured, it's got a bit of a bitter taste to it, doesn't it? And obviously, with all these players in the NFL going into the playoffs, you don't want to see injuries anyway. From a fantasy perspective, a player prop perspective for the next week, and just from a neutral watching the game kind of perspective. So, stop getting injured, players, especially our guys.
Yeah, it's really selfish. Stop it. Or if you're going to at least hit the over or whatever our bet is first. That's absolutely fine. We'll be moving on to our selections very shortly. Let's talk about our overlords, our masters, and whatever else you want to call them, our friends at SBK. They're the sponsors of this podcast. If you haven't downloaded the app already, £10 stake will get you £40 in free bets if you're a new customer. T's and C's apply, 18 plus only. Please gamble responsibly. And this Sunday as well, they're giving you a 25% free ACCA boost if you like my selections, Tom's selections, you want to mix and match them, or if you want to ignore us entirely, that's sometimes preferred, and put your own selections in, you get a 25% ACCA boost on NFL matches. As I say, max stakes apply, T's and C's apply, 18 plus, and please gamble responsibly. And now Tom is going to do his pointing thing.
Link in the description below. Great offers, great company. Don't need to say any more. Go and do it. Go sign up with SBK, take advantage, and hopefully back some winners this weekend.
Absolutely. I said at the start of the podcast that go get yourself a drink, enjoy the next half an hour, because there'll be plenty of people who joined us on the play of the day last week. Not just my play of the day, but Tom's play of the day as well. If you're new to the Turf and Touchdowns podcast, if a play of the day lands, that person gets to take a victory sip. And if you've managed to go along with it, you also get a victory sip. This is one of the lovely days, Tom, where we both get a victory sip, and you're going to use a sippy cup.
Well, it's actually a miniature bottle, hotel branded. Actually, I probably shouldn't do that because I don't sponsor the podcast. But
look how big you are. That's a 1 litre bottle, that is.
It's the smallest bottle I've ever seen. But yeah, I've got a little bit left, so it's time for a victory sip, mate. Very well done. It's been a long time since we both had one on the same podcast. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
100%. But these are the most delicious ones. I've got my Tiger Cup.
Oh, mine was great. Albeit it was just water.
It just tastes a bit better. It tastes a bit like
Does.
victory. The concerning thing is that Tom's now got to last the entire podcast on that little bit of water.
It's more than concerning, mate. I am fretting. Let's get on with it.
Let's get on with it. We've got 9 selections this week. We're going to start on Saturday because we've got 2 Saturday games to be looking forward to. 1 selection from Tom. I'm leaving Saturday alone. I found it a little bit difficult and there wasn't anything that stood out to me. So, Tom, if you could bloom us with your first selection. Did that work?
Bloom. Wow. Look at you go. Yeah,
because
okay,
you know the guy that you know the player that you're going to do.
Yeah, I like it. I really like it. Okay, yeah, 2 games on Saturday, as you've already talked about. The last game is the most interesting one. It's the Baltimore Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a really good matchup. I think it's at 9:30 p.m. UK time, so it's a great time to watch as well if you're in the UK. Obviously, it's always a good time to watch if you're in the US. This game could decide the AFC North if Pittsburgh win. They're already a game above Baltimore, so if they beat Baltimore, they'll be 2 games ahead with 2 weeks left of the regular season and likely to win the AFC North. However, if Baltimore win, then these 2 teams go level at the top on 10 and 5, and there's going to be a really good kind of run-in to see who makes the top of that division by the end of the campaign. The Steelers won the reverse fixture 18-16 earlier in the year. They scored 6 field goals, didn't score a single touchdown, and still beat Baltimore. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think we're going to see a lot more offense. I think Baltimore are going to be a lot better as well at stopping Pittsburgh moving the ball, and I think Baltimore will probably win. However, my bet in this game is Zay Flowers, hence the bloom from Luke, over 59.5 receiving yards at 10-11. Now, in this matchup earlier in the year that I've already talked about, Flowers had just 2 catches for 39 yards. He did get a touchdown in that game, which kind of brought it close towards the end, but he wasn't used much. He had 6 targets, only 2 catches. The Ravens know they need to get their receivers into the play this time around because that was their major fault last time. They ran the ball, and couldn't get it out to Flowers, to Bateman, to Likely, to Andrews. They just couldn't do it. Lamar was looking, everyone was covered. Virtually every offensive play where they tried to pass. This time they're going to mix it up a bit. Flowers wasn't used much last week, but he's having a fantastic year, as predicted actually in one of our anti-post podcasts at the start of the season. 916 yards so far, which actually does cover his anti-post season total of 875. He's also had 4 touchdowns. He's going to be the proper weapon this week, I think, for Baltimore. And Lamar's going to be looking for him often. He only needs 60 yards to cover. I wouldn't be surprised if he got 7 catches on 10 targets, let's say, for 85 yards. So I'm taking Zay Flowers as my 1 bet on Saturday in the Ravens-Steelers game, over 59.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I don't mind Zay Flowers at all. He's a guy that's been hit or miss so far this year, but I think Baltimore are getting better on offense. Not better, but they're using more weapons. They're not just Derrick Henry run the ball. They're not give it to Lamar. They're using as many as they possibly can. I've got 2 things to bring up, not related to your selection, just because I'm a really good presenter and I can keep this show flowing. But did you see the season-long line for David Montgomery on rushing yards?
Oh, I did. I saw it on Twitter. He lost by half a yard, didn't he?
For the whole season. His line was 775 and a half rushing yards.
Yeah.
And he got 775 and then got hurt and he's done.
That stinks.
That is one of the worst beats you will see. The entire season you're looking onto that and it just sucks. I feel for anyone that bet that. And on the Thursday podcast, I mentioned that I was in a bit of a conundrum about who to start a quarterback in my championship semi-final fantasy football game. Now, I mentioned Geno Smith, got him, got Bo Nix, which I'm not going to start. Kirk Cousins and Caleb Williams were on the waiver wire. Now, Kirk Cousins has changed into Michael Penix, who I picked up. Penix or Smith, which way are you going?
I would go Penix, you know. I know it's a first start for a rookie, but this guy's good. He's really good. And Atlanta have got a nice matchup against the Giants, so I would go Penix.
I'm leaning Penix. Leaning Penix. There might be a bit of rain in Seattle as well, so there is a possibility of that. But if you could comment down below, I really need the help. If you could comment Geno Smith or Michael Penix. I know it's not the most exciting of choices, but that's my one weakness. That'll be a massive help. So comment down below, Geno Smith or Michael Penix, or a other who will be on the waiver wire, but there's not many because it's a 14-team league. Speaking of Michael Penix, Tom,
What a link.
if I do start him, I'm very much hoping that all of his receivers have a good time, and you're hoping that one of them isn't the Pitts.
Hey, that wasn't as good. The link originally was good though. Yes, this is my first of 4 selections on Sunday. We are moving swiftly into Sunday action. The first of 4 selections for myself. You've got 4 upcoming as well. And as you say, it's in the Atlanta game for myself. Penix is a very good quarterback. He's a rookie, comes in. So we do need to see how he kind of acclimatizes, let's say, in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons, though, should win this matchup, whether he plays great or whether he plays just average. He's not going to have a poor game. It's just they're against the Giants, and also Penix is a good QB. It's just not going to be a terrible game for him. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the safety blanket. Usually you do see rookie QBs come in and lean on their tight ends. I don't know why that is, maybe the middle of the field rather than throwing way out wide to against these corners that can be hunting for the ball. You know, it's safer to go middle of the field, seam routes, hitches, and look for the big frame of a tight end. I think Kyle Pitts kind of is a perfect scenario for Penix. You know, he's going to be looking at this 6'6" tight end who was amazing in college for Georgia. And in the NFL, he's been very much a disappointment, but we know what he's capable of. Kyle Pitts, if he performs, could easily hit 60, 70 yards in a game. It's just he doesn't get many looks. He's not very good at getting open. But if you get the ball into Kyle Pitts' hands, then he will get lots of yards after catch. And his line in this game is just 27.5 receiving yards. So give me the over. Kyle Pitts over 27.5 receiving yards at 10 to 11. Surely they're going to be leaning on Pitts. If they start leaning on Drake London, then Pitts may not hit. But I think Pitts is going to get at least 4 catches, and that should be more than enough to cover this line.
Yeah, he did get a bit more action last week, Kyle Pitts. I went back through Michael Penix's college career as well, obviously at Washington, which was absolutely sparkling, just to see who he used. And honestly, there was no real trend. He just used anyone. Jack Westow was his tight end there, and he had a Culp, I think, who's at Tampa Bay now anyway. He used both of them a little bit, Westover a lot more, but when you've got Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk in college, they're going to be the guys you're throwing to.
Yeah, exactly. He was always going to look at the wide receivers because they were stars in college, and they could still become stars. Well, Rome Odunze could. I don't think Polk will be in the NFL. But yeah, his stars at Atlanta are Bijan Robinson, which is all well and good, but you know, I don't want to be taking receiving yards because he's going to run the ball more often than not. Drake London, who's going to be covered, he's a good target, but you know, he's probably going to be covered or double covered in most plays. And then Kyle Pitts, surely he's a safety blanket.
Yeah, I did contemplate putting in Ray McLeod, but he was in the doghouse last week. I hate when coaches do this, right? They fumble the week before, so they put him in the doghouse. It's like, oh, don't fumble. It's like, yeah, you know not to fumble. That's your job. You had Ray McLeod on the sideline with a ball in his arms. He's like, oh, I feel so bad about myself. No, you're not going to get anything. We're going to hurt the team next week. It's just so dumb. But maybe Ray McLeod will be allowed to play football again, and he'll learn not to fumble. But I'm going to move on to my first selection of the week, which is the beneficiary of David Montgomery not playing, Jahmyr Gibbs, who is just going to be a fantasy stud for the rest of the year. He turns into a proper workhorse when David Montgomery is out, but Montgomery's done for the season. Last year, he played 3 games without David Montgomery in weeks 3, 7, and 8 against Atlanta, Baltimore, and there was one other game as well. But those 3 games yielded 17 carries for 80 yards, 11 carries for 68 and a touchdown, and 26 carries, 152 yards and a touchdown. This week, his rushing line, it is high, 87.5 rushing yards. That's 10 to 11. But I think he covers that. I think this is a big, big week for Jahmyr Gibbs. Dan Campbell's come out and said that Gibbs needs to be ready to become a workhorse back. I think he absolutely is. I know they've got Craig Reynolds as well. And yes, Craig Reynolds will get a few carries. If this is a blowout, then maybe he could find his way into the end zone. But he's not a guy you're going to be relying on or betting on. He had a season-high snap percentage last week, obviously with Montgomery getting hurt. But a lot of the the factor in that is because they were behind against Buffalo and they were playing from behind from a very early stage. He still managed 8 carries for 31 yards and a touchdown. And Chicago, they're continuing to be poor against the run. We've said it all season, and we've used it against them all season. To running backs, they allowed 114 yards to Minnesota last week, most of it to Aaron Jones, but Cam Akers got involved as well. Ty Chandler managed to get a few as well. To San Francisco, they managed to concede 107 yards on the ground, 175 yards to Detroit 3 weeks ago. That includes Jahmyr Gibbs, who was in and about this line. That was back in week 13. I think Ben Johnson kind of cost his team a little bit that day as well. In his play calling was just absolutely atrocious. I know Ben Johnson's being spoke about as this massive, massive guy, and he's going to be a head coach, and he will be for sure. But his play calling against Chicago was terrible. He allowed them back into the game. He called 30 rushing plays between Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. 9 of them were in the second half. They were up by 2 scores at one point. They just kept on passing. They allowed Chicago to come back into the game. I don't think Ben Johnson's going to do that again this week. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a massive, massive week. 87.5 rushing yards. I'm going to take the over on that, Tom. And he's on my redraft team, so I need him to smash that line as well.
Yeah, he's in my dynasty team, so I'm all for you. I really hope Gibbs does hit the over. And to be honest, he is one of the most dynamic players in the whole of the NFL. He's basically Bijan Robinson in disguise. I think they're very, very similar. Maybe Bijan's a little bit better after contact when he's running the ball. But Gibbs is as agile. He can make as many big plays. I personally think he's a lot better than David Montgomery anyway. I know Montgomery is still a good running back, but if I was the Lions, Gibbs would be my number one. And yeah, I think he's definitely going to cover. The line is quite high, which is why I didn't play the bet. But yeah, I think you're going to be good there. Shall I move on to my next one?
Absolutely. Let's move on with some deja vu.
Bit of deja vu. Any long-term viewers of our Sunday podcast know that I like going back to players that do me a solid. And Trey McBride did us a solid last week. He landed us the play of the day. He had 10 targets. The first half, it did not look good. I think he had 2 catches for 8 yards midway through the second quarter or at the end of the second quarter. But he really took off in the second half. This week, I like the Cardinals to win. And I also like Trey McBride once again. Now, there's a caveat before I give you some reasoning behind McBride. The weather is supposed to be extremely cold. I saw an interview with Kyler Murray, and he's never played in this cold kind of temperature before. I think it's supposed to be like 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Never played in this temp before, and he didn't seem overly looking forward to it. But I think that might just be a bit of PR for socials. It's not going to be Green Bay freezing. It's just going to be a little bit chilly. So calm yourself, Kyler. Trey McBride is Kyler's safety blanket, much like Kyle Pitts will hopefully be Michael Penix's safety blanket. His line this week is set to 70.5 receiving yards. Give me the over. We need 71 or more to win this bet. If you watched this last week, which hopefully you did, I don't need to go all into Trey McBride's stats. But what I will say is over the last 4 games, he has 51 targets. 51 targets in 4 games. McBride is the guy that everyone is looking for to produce for the Arizona Cardinals, especially Kyler Murray. He's looking for McBride to produce. He's going to do it again. Whenever he seems to find McBride 8-9 times in a game, the Cardinals seem to win. So I see no reason why that won't be the case this week. The Giants also play a lot of man coverage. They play the 4th highest amount of man coverage snaps by percent. That's the worst explanation ever, but hopefully you understood what I meant. And they're also shocking against the pass. So combined man coverage, shocking against the pass, with a matchup nightmare in Trey McBride, who's going to be on a linebacker, a safety on occasions. Surely he's going to take advantage of these. Give me the over 70.5 for Trey.
What price would you take Trey McBride to score a touchdown? Obviously, it's not a selection, but he's not done it all year. Yeah, well, he got the rushing touchdown, which he fell on a fumble, as we mentioned last week. Still no receiving touchdown for Trey McBride. He was tackled at about the 1-inch line last week, so they are trying to get him a touchdown, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. He would have been up there. I mean, look, he gets a massive target share, so obviously you would think about him for touchdowns. But as you say, he hasn't scored one yet this year, so you can't really put him up with confidence. Maybe 15-8, just purely on the basis that he hasn't scored one so far. But he's got to be one of the most logical touchdown scorers for this team.
Yeah, he will get one before the end of the year. And look, if we're going into like week 17 and he hasn't got a touchdown, that will be a play for me because they're going to work away just to get him a touchdown, just to go, good job. There you go. There's your reward for a consistent season. But it's a tough time for touchdown backers of Trey McBride. It's been a long season. I'm going to move into a guy who I would say it's picked up, but he's actually been okay all year. And it's one of Tom's best friends from years ago in the form of Devontae Adams, who is having a real good time of things at the moment over in New York. Look, the Jets are eliminated from playoff contention. They're moving on to next year, and they've started playing good football. Look, Devontae Adams has had 2 big back-to-back weeks. The Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams connection seems to be back. He's gone over 100 yards 3 times this year, 2 of them for New York, once in Vegas. 2 of them were the last couple of weeks. So he had a massive week last week with 198 yards. He went over 100 a couple of weeks back as well. The Rams aren't exactly a tough defense to try and target. Look, I know they held San Francisco to no touchdowns last week. San Francisco were bad, honestly. The running game was Brock Purdy was absolutely diabolical. I'm going to say this, actually. As a Seahawks fan, I really think that San Francisco should give Brock Purdy a $60 million a year contract. I think that would be a fantastic idea. I want Brock Purdy to be your quarterback for the next few years. And I think San Francisco should commit to Brock Purdy and sign him up to a 10-year contract. I think that would be a great idea. As a Seahawks fan, I fully endorse it, Tom.
I actually don't think it's as bad as you do, but yeah,
I think he's capable, but yeah. he wants like top quarterback money in the league. Please, you're nowhere near that good.
Sure, I understand that he's not one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but it's going to be interesting to see how he does fare next year. Actually, because they're going to be without a couple of their wide receivers. McCaffrey may still be, dealing with injuries, so it'll be a proper test for Brock.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they're going to pay him, people have got to go. Debo's got to go. CMC might go. He might move on to someone else. It seems like their Super Bowl window is shutting pretty quickly, and they've squandered it a little bit. But that's by the by. Anytime we can dunk on Brock Purdy, that's fine. I just think Devontae Adams will have a big week. His over, his line is 72.5 on the receiving yard side of things. That's at 10 to 11. He's being used so much by Aaron Rodgers at the moment. He's getting double-digit targets on the regular now. He's had double-digit targets, actually, 5 of the last 6 weeks. It's going to be more of a shootout as well against the Rams. I like Devontae Adams. I think, once again, Tom, he has a big week. And I'm going to put a pin in him. I'm going to loop round to him again in a moment because I'm going to hand back to you for your next selection.
Yeah, I'm going to crack on with the selection. We'll talk about Adams after you go back to him in a second. My third pick on Sunday and 4th on total in this podcast is an under. Ooh, I can hear you all say it at home.
What?
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know you knew how to look on that side of the screen.
Hey, I put one up on Thursday Night Football as well. We are recording this on Thursday morning.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Thursday morning. We don't know how that one's gone yet, so don't victory lap it.
Yeah, I won't. Yes, it's an under, and it's a guy who's actually been really, really good this year. It's Terry McLaurin. I'm going to take under 65.5 receiving yards at 10 to 11 in the Washington game. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. A really good matchup. I think there's 3 points in it on the handicap spread, and it's going to be quite crucial going into the playoffs what happens in this game. The reason I don't like him to hit his over and why I'm playing the under is not because anything to do with Terry McLaurin, really. He's been great. I think he's had 5 or something games where he's had multiple touchdowns. He's been Jaden Daniels' number 1 read. He's made some huge plays and some incredible catches. It's nothing against McLaurin. The issue I have with Terry in this spot is he's playing the Eagles, and the Eagles have, in my opinion, the 2 best corners, as in the tandem. Not individual best, but a tandem of 2 best players. They have Mitchell on one side. They've got Cooper DeJean on the other. Both are incredible corners. Both don't allow wide receivers to really rack up yards against them. Not only have they got those 2, but they've got Darius Slay and they've got CJ Gardner-Johnson in that secondary. It's one of the best secondaries in the league and probably why the Eagles have done so well this season and they made Pittsburgh look stupid last week. I don't think Terry McLaurin's going to be the number 1 read this week. I think they're going to be the Commanders are going to be relying a lot on the run game. Maybe Zach Ertz in the middle of the field, Dumpos as well. I just don't think Terry's going to be doing much. In the previous matchup between these 2 teams, McLaurin had 1 catch on 2 targets for 10 yards. That's kind of what I'm expecting this week as well. If the line was set to 40, I'd be more tentative just because, with McLaurin, he can get a 40-yard catch. It's not beyond the realms of possibility with him. But the line is 65.5. It's not a low line. I don't think he's hitting the over. I think the corners keep him covered. It's going to be a DeJean Island, Mitchell Island on the other side. McLaurin's just going to be basically taking the corners out of it so they can use underneath routes. Give me the under.
I was so close to putting up Terry McLaurin under.
Were you?
I've just seen it was in your list. He was so high on my list to take on. Part of it, as you say, it's not an anti Terry McLaurin thing. It's a pro Quinion Mitchell thing, largely. Also Cooper DeJean, yes. Against Quinion Mitchell earlier on in the season, he ran 20 routes while Mitchell was in coverage of him. 0 targets,
Yeah,
0 receptions, 0 yards.
yeah.
He was just locked down. As you say, he had 1 catch in the entire game. I do think Jaden Daniels will be a little bit braver. You just got to throw him the ball. Honestly, if he's on Mitchell and he gets even half a yard of separation, you just got to give Terry McLaurin a chance to have a go, because it didn't work for the Commanders that week. You just got to be braver, quite frankly. But that doesn't mean that Terry McLaurin is going to get a ton of catches.
I hope not. Anyway, I hope he isn't braver. To be honest, it'll be interesting to see what happens. If Washington are up early in this game, then they'll definitely not look to him. If they're down big, then maybe they will try and force it to Terry. But I hope that's not the case.
I think Washington are in for a whooping this week, so I'm okay on that. I think Eagles -3.5 is fine. Let's move back to Davante Adams, because I said we would. I'm also going to double down on Davante Adams. I'm going to go anytime touchdown as well. That's currently 13-10. He's been very good so far this season on the touchdown side of things. He's had 6 touchdowns on the year. 4 of them have come in the last 3 weeks. He obviously had 2 touchdowns last week. That was on his 198-yard game. Like I say, Aaron Rodgers is looking for him all over the place, especially in the red zone at the moment. Garrett Wilson also managed to find himself into the end zone. The Rams, they're allowing plenty of touchdowns to wide receivers and plenty of yards as well. I kind of made this point last week when I was talking about Juwan Jennings, but against Buffalo, Khalil Shakir got 106 yards. Amari Cooper got 95 yards. They conceded 42 points as well, including, I think, 3 touchdowns to the wide receiver position. I think Davante Adams is going to be looked for plenty. I don't necessarily trust a great deal else in the Jets offense, honestly. Even Breece Hall has been pretty woeful this season. Maybe he's a bit banged up, I'm not sure, but it's hard to trust anyone else who isn't Garrett Wilson and who isn't Davante Adams. I prefer Davante Adams, so I'll take the over on the receiving yards of 72.5. But I'm going to add in as well Davante Adams anytime touchdown at 13-10, and I'm hoping that Aaron Rodgers doesn't revert back to old man Rodgers.
3 things on that I want to mention. Firstly, Breece Hall is banged up. I think it's either a knee or an ankle injury, but it was very questionable to play last week. He is playing this week, but he is banged up. Secondly, I don't think he will revert to old man Rodgers. Did you see the smile on his face when Davante produced that incredible over-the-shoulder catch last week? It looked like Rodgers felt that love for football again, and obviously they've got an incredible connection. And thirdly, and most interestingly, did you see Garrett Wilson sulking on the sidelines last week when Davante was having this incredible second half? Wilson on the sidelines.
No, I didn't see that.
He was extremely annoyed. He was demonstrating to the coaches, and I don't know. Every time Rodgers threw him the ball, it seemed to be batted down, or Wilson wasn't able to catch it. Yet whenever he threw it to Adams, Adams was going for 50-yard gains, and Wilson was not happy. So I wouldn't be surprised if they lean a lot on Adams yet again. You know, that attitude from Wilson won't sit well.
No, especially not with Aaron Rodgers.
No.
If Aaron Rodgers has got someone to blame, that's when Aaron Rodgers is at his best. It's never his fault, but if it's genuinely someone else's fault, that's fine. Isn't it annoying that the sun's come out and I've just got half of my body in sun now?
I didn't even notice, but yes.
It's so irritating. It's the first time in about 2 months the sun's come out in England, but that's mighty annoying. We've got 2 more selections for you this week on the Turf and Touchdowns podcast. Tom is up next, and he's kind of reverting the type because he's just replacing Nick Chubb from last week.
Yeah, Jerome Ford, over 50.5 rushing yards. I've got no selections in the late game on Sunday, everything in the 6 p.m. games. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm flying back to the UK on Sunday morning and I'll be jet lagged. Nothing to do at all, I promise. Yes, Jerome Ford. It is lies. Jerome Ford, over 50.5 rushing yards for the Cleveland Browns against Cincinnati Bengals. I have a problem with this, which is that I think the Bengals are going to win and win comfortably. However, the fact that the Browns are playing DTR instead of Jameis Winston means they're going to be running the ball a hell of a lot. It's not going to be Jerry Jeudy constantly. It's going to be running the ball. DTR scrambles, Jerome Ford running, Elijah Moore jet sweeps. A lot of running the ball. Jerome Ford this year hasn't had many carries, but he's averaging 5.2 yards when he carries the ball. Like, he's been explosive. Last week, he racked off like a 62-yard touchdown run. something Nick Chubb couldn't do prior to his injury. Obviously, he gets the number one role as a running back now that Chubb's definitely out. Providing the Browns don't go down big early, which is a possibility considering how good the Bengals offense has been, I think Ford definitely covers this line. You just need the Browns to stick in it in this game until halftime. Keep it to one score game. Ford should cover. So give me the over 50 and a half.
Yeah, I like it. Last week when I was watching Jerome Ford gallivant down the sideline for his massive touchdowns, I was watching thinking, oh, good Nick Chubb. And then suddenly, no, Nick Chubb was out of the game and it was 34 instead of 24. But Jerome Ford, he's a very serviceable back. We saw that at the start of the year when Nick Chubb was out. Kind of left field end to the podcast because we're going for Jerome Ford for Tom, and I'm going for Brenton Strange. He is a tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars because he's only recently come onto our radar. He's the guy that if you're an Evan Engram fan, Tom, or an Evan Engram fantasy manager, you see a catch and go, oh, who's that? Strange. That's Brenton Strange.
It is. Before you go into why you like Brenton Strange this week, I did actually pick him up in one of my dynasty leagues, and also this is unlike you because you only ever put up tight ends when they play in London.
Correct. Well, kind of. Mainly correct. Wait until we get to the playoffs. By the way, I've got something real special for the playoffs. So subscribe. We'll bring that down in the next few weeks. But Brenton Strange has stepped into the Jacksonville Jaguars tight end one role. Evan Engram is on IR, so he's done for effectively the season. He stepped into the role perfectly as well. He was instantly used. He had 12 targets last week, 11 catches for 73 yards. He didn't do much with those targets. 11 for 73 is not fantastic. It's fine, but you would hope for a little bit more. But look, he was doing a job for Mac Jones. He was checking it down. He, I think, averaged like 6 yards a catch or something like that. But he did lead the Jags on receptions. He was one ahead of Brian Thomas. He was 2 targets behind Brian Thomas as well. And those two were a long way clear of anyone else on the team. So Brenton Strange is being used. And Las Vegas aren't good against tight ends. We've said this a lot throughout the course of the season. They've allowed 908 yards to tight ends on the season and 7 touchdowns as well. A list of guys, this isn't the whole season, a list of guys that have done well. This is the recent weeks that guys have done okay. Last week, Kyle Pitts, 4 for 28. That doesn't sound impressive. Keep in mind that Kirk Cousins only completed 11 passes for 112 yards. That's suddenly a lot more impressive on that. That's a huge yardage percentage on the team and also a reception percentage. Cade Otton the week prior to that, 3 catches for 70 yards. Travis Kelce the week prior to that, 7 catches for 68 in the same game. Noah Gray, 4 catches for 58. Jonnu Smith the week prior to that, 6 catches, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. The week before that, we had the Cincinnati Bengals in town. Mike Gesicki, 5 for 102 touchdowns. Look, I could go on. There are tight ends all season that have dominated the Las Vegas Raiders. I think Brenton Strange will be the next to do that. He is dealing with an AC joint injury. That's one slight question mark, but he's practiced all week. It's never really been an issue. His participation for Sunday has never been in doubt. I think this will be a relatively close game. And honestly, Mac Jones, I don't want to say he's looked good, but he's done his job. He's still getting the ball to his receivers. He's still doing a job for Brian Thomas. He's still managing to move the ball, and he's almost managing to win a few games as well. I think they might take this game also, the Jaguars. So Brenton Strange, over 35.5 receiving yards. If he gets anywhere near, Tom, the 12 targets from last week, he'll cover this line easily.
He will, and obviously Matt Jones played last week and looked towards Strange, so it seems like Strange is one of his favourite targets. Mac actually really looked like he was enjoying football last week as well. Lots of celebrations, lots of smiles on his face, which is good to see considering how badly he struggled for the Patriots for a long period of time.
I feel like the Patriots tried to beat the Mac Jones out of him. They go, no, we got a Patriots way. You need to focus on football, and football's not fun. It's about winning. And now he's gone somewhere else, and he's gone to Florida. The sun's on his back, and he's gone. You know what? This is okay, and I'm all right with this. I can return to Alabama Mac Jones now.
Exactly, and in Alabama he was very good as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on this week. Hopefully, for your sake, Strange does cover. I do also think the Jags will probably take the matchup too.
Yeah, I think it's like a 1 point game between them. I can't remember which way, but the Jags Raiders will be a close game. One of three, I think, later Sunday kickoffs on the week. There were two other plays I wanted, but the lines aren't out yet, so I can't put those forward because I don't know what they're going to be. James Conner on the rushing yards was one of them. I'd imagine it'd be in the 70s, but he's the only guy left now. Trey Benson is injured. DeMarcado is also injured as well, and he's against Carolina, who suck against the run. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, have a big night against Minnesota as well in Seattle. There is possibly a little bit of rain, so do keep your eyes on that. But those lines aren't out. They're not going to be official selections, but I wanted to put them forward. Before we round up our picks, Tom, we're on the quest for 450 subscribers. I know it's a big ask, and I know we're asking a lot of you guys, but come on, we put in so much work on this podcast. Just do your little bit. Just click subscribe. We're currently on 414 subscribers. We want to get to 450 as soon as we possibly can. Consider it, Tom. Consider it a Christmas present to us.
Yeah, please consider it. It does actually help us. The more subscribers we get, the better chance we can continue this podcast for a longer period of time. So please do it. It takes you 1 second. It doesn't cost anything. Whack it down below if you enjoy the podcast. If you don't need to press it. That's absolutely fine. Should we get into the picks?
Let's do it. Subscribe, comment down below, leave a like. It helps us out immensely on the podcast. And we've got some good stuff coming for the NFL playoffs, which are only a few weeks away. Our picks. Tom, you go first.
Hopefully this is as good as last week with a high percentage chance. You can play singles. That's what we advise. Singles. We have that for our profit loss. But obviously, if you want to add a couple together for a combination bet, that's absolutely fine. Do whatever is best for you. But 5 selections for me in week 16. Read them off the phone before anyone asks why I'm looking down. Number 1, on Saturday night, Zay Flowers for the Baltimore Ravens, over 59.5 receiving yards. That's a 10 to 11. Selection number 2, moving on to Sunday now. Kyle Pitts for the Atlanta Falcons, over 27.5 receiving yards at 10 to 11. Selection 3, Trey McBride, Mr. All Reliable for the Arizona Cardinals, over 70.5 receiving yards at 10 to 11. Selection 4, Terry McLaurin for the Washington Commanders, underlining under, not the over, the under 65.5 receiving yards at 10 to 11. And finally, my play of the day this week, Jerome Ford for the Cleveland Browns, over 50.5 rushing yards at 10 to 11. Just stay in the game, DTR. Keep the game going, and Ford will cover.
Yeah, I mean, it's DTR. I'm devastated DTR's playing because I've got David Njoku in fantasy. David Njoku would have been nearly a play of the day this week if Jameis was in, but he's not. Cleveland hate fun, and they're trying to ruin everything once again. Screw you, Cleveland Browns. My selections for this week, Devontae Adams, over 72.5 receiving yards. That's 10 to 11. I'm going to double up on Devontae Adams as well. I want him anytime touchdown. That's 13 to 10. Brenton Strange, over 35.5 receiving yards as well. That's 10 to 11 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he should cover. He got so many targets last week, and Mac Jones is clearly looking for him. And then my guy, the play of the day this week, Jahmyr Gibbs, over 87.5 rushing yards. We're getting out of the way early in the early slate on Sunday. I think he's going to have a very, very big game at 10 to 11. And if you want just a little bit of sugar on top, we're approaching Christmas. You're allowed a little bit of bad stuff. I think a big price double that you could play, James Conner and Jahmyr Gibbs to score 2 or more touchdowns each, is about 9 to 1 as a double. I think both of those guys are going to have massive games. That's going to be a bet that I play. It's not a selection on this podcast, but it is going to be something that I play on that part. Look, we're getting into the time of the year, Tom, where guys are hurt, and you're going to have guys with a backfield all to themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They could both have huge games. So, yeah, I'll be looking out for that as well. Obviously, as you just said, not an official pick, so it won't come up on the graphic that we just showed over there, I think. But yeah, just keep an eye out on that.
Brave to point.
Very brave. Regret.
Brave to point. I'm hoping that's completely the wrong side. But that's us done on the Turf and Touchdowns podcast for week 16. We're very much hoping that we can follow up what was a fantastic week just last week, and hopefully 2 winners on Thursday night as well for week 16. But we'll be back next week with a horse racing podcast. It's going to be messy next week, actually, Tom, because we've got that whole Christmas thing that's in the way.
Yeah, it's a bit annoying, isn't it? So we're covering a horse race. It's Boxing Day. Boxing Day's Thursday, so there'll be a horse racing podcast out, I presume, Christmas Eve, which is for Boxing Day. Then we've got NFL, which is going to cover the whole Christmas period. It's going to be messy. I need to get on this running order ASAP, don't I? But subscribe down below. Make sure you don't miss out on all the content. The stuff next week won't be the same days as usual in terms of when it's published. So just keep an eye out. If you whack that bell notification down below as well, then you'll get a pop-up on your phone whenever we post, which is probably the easiest way to keep a track on things.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be doing something. I don't know what, but we'll be doing something. And we'll be on the build up to Christmas with you guys. But as far as week 16 goes, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week at some point. Stay tuned for that. If you subscribe, then you'll be kept up to date with everything that we do. But for week 16, that's us done. Until next week, stay safe, look after one another. Goodbye.